The calmest patient I ever saw had a bullet in his head. I've worked in hospitals long enough to know one thing. When someone walks into the emergency room calmly, that doesn't always mean they're okay. Sometimes, it means they haven't fully realized how bad things actually are. And one night during my residency, I learned that lesson in a way I'll never forget. Because a man walked into the emergency room on his own 2 feet, holding his hand to his forehead, and politely asked to see a doctor. This happened years ago, back when I was still a resident. The kind of shift where time starts to blur together. The emergency room was busy, but not completely chaotic. That uncomfortable middle ground where everyone is stretched thin, but still functioning. Trauma bays were occupied. Hallway patients were waiting on lab results. The background noise never stopped. Monitors beeping, overhead pages echoing, carts rolling past. You get used to it. Your brain learns how to filter out anything that isn't immediately threatening. Which is probably why, when this man walked in, he didn't set off any alarms at first. He didn't arrive by ambulance. There was no wheelchair, no police escort, no urgency. He just walked through the doors like any other patient. He was middle-aged, well-kept, and calm. He had one hand pressed firmly against the center of his forehead, the way someone might apply pressure after bumping their head on a cabinet. There was no blood running down his face, no visible panic, no signs of distress. If anything, he looked slightly embarrassed, like he didn't want to be a bother. He made eye contact with me and asked very calmly, "Is there a doctor available?" I answered instinctively, "Yes." Without saying a word, he slowly removed his hand from his forehead, and in that moment, my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. Because where his hand had been, there was a hole, not a cut, not a gash, not a laceration. A perfectly round hole, clean, circular, almost too precise, a gunshot wound. I remember feeling a cold, sinking sensation in my chest. The kind of disbelief where your thoughts lag behind what's happening in front of you. This man should not have been standing. For a brief moment, the entire area seemed to freeze. In emergency medicine, there's often a split second where everyone silently recalibrates, where your mind catches up and training takes over. Then everything moved at once. He was placed on a stretcher immediately. Vital signs were taken. Trauma protocols were activated. Nurses moved with the kind of focus that only comes from experience. And still, the strangest part of all was this. He was fully conscious. He answered every question clearly. He followed commands. He explained what had happened in a calm, steady voice. No slurred speech, no confusion, no obvious neurological deficits. Nothing about it made sense. A gunshot wound to the forehead is usually catastrophic. The frontal bone offers some protection, but not enough to stop most rounds. Even a small change in angle or velocity can mean the difference between life and death. As we prepared him for imaging, the tension in the room was unmistakable. Everyone was thinking the same thing. The scans were going to be bad, very bad. When the CT images finally appeared on the screen, several of us gathered around to look. And then, there was silence. The bullet had penetrated the skin and entered the skull, but it never reached the brain. It was embedded directly into the skull bone itself. There was no intracranial bleeding, no brain tissue damage, no midline shift, nothing that would explain why this man should have survived. The margin between survival and death had been measured in millimeters. Pure luck doesn't even begin to describe it. He was taken to surgery shortly after. Neurosurgery removed the bullet carefully, treating it like a live threat even after it had stopped moving. The procedure went smoothly. There were no complications, no neurological deficits, no lasting damage. Within days, he was walking, talking, and recovering, completely intact. All he carried from that night was a scar on his forehead and a story most people would never believe without proof. I've seen patients panic over injuries that barely needed treatment, and I've seen others arrive quietly, carrying damage that should have killed them. That night reminded me how thin the line really is. A fraction of an inch, a slightly different angle, a moment of bad luck. Instead, this man walked into the emergency room with a bullet in his head and walked out alive. And even now, years later, I still think about how close he came without ever knowing it. For more stories like this, like and share this video and follow our page.